So, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first session of day 2 at FEED on the topic Credit Where It's Due, Leveraging Carbon Credit for Cold Chain. India's cold chain infrastructure faces a significant deficit of 3 million megaton with a limited capacity for diverse perishable, resulting in annual food losses of rupees 92,000 crores. While sustainable cold chain technology offers a promising solution for small farmers, high cost remains a major barrier. This session will explore how carbon credit can act as a transformative mechanism to finance and drive sustainability in the cold chain sector. It is my great pleasure to introduce our distinguished panelist, Dr. Khushbu Gupta, Principal Research Associate, AEEE, Dr. Anar Bhatt, Program Manager, Food Loss and Waste, India, Dr. Pramod Kumar Singh, Senior Director, Research and Program, AEEE, Ruchika Dral, Deputy Secretary, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Ravindra Dolare, President EcoZen Solution Private Limited. He will be joining us soon. I would like to request everyone to come on the stage. Please join me in welcoming with a warm round of applause. Now I would like to hand over the stage to our moderator, Dr. Khushbu Gupta.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you, our esteemed panelists, to be here for this session. This session on credit where it's due, leveraging carbon credits for cold chain. We have gathered here to talk about cold chain sector in general has a lot of issues regarding financing, regarding the technology upgradation that is happening, innovative solutions that we have. In this session, we have come together to see what are the opportunities to use carbon credits to maybe solve some of the solutions when we talk about developing cold chain infrastructure which is sustainable and affordable. So um, just before even we start about how carbon credits and what are the opportunities in this sector, I would request Dr. Anar from WRI to talk about some of the experiences from her past studies on post-harvest losses. Why is it important? Why when we want to talk about carbon credits in this cold chain sector?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Khushbu. So just to sort of, you asked why, right? Just to sort of set the context, uh, when we are talking about GHG emissions, when we are talking about, carbon credits, food loss and waste, if it were a country, it would be the third largest emitter in the world after US and China. It contributes 8% to the global GHG emissions. And in terms of economic losses, and if you're talking about the Indian context, just if you're talking about the 54 primary crops, including cereals, pulses, perishables, we lost around 1,52,000 crores in 2022. So just in post-harvest losses. And we're not talking about the food waste, which is the consumer side of story. We are talking about the production side of things. So that's the scale of losses. So who bears this burden? It's usually the farmers who lose the revenue. It's the consumers who end up losing food and nutrition. And when we're talking about the quantum, 60% of these losses are contributed by fruits and vegetables, poultry, meat, egg, dairy, all nutritious food, right? And why is this happening? It's due to the lack of infrastructure, especially in terms of cold chain, storage, transport, processing. So there is a scope here to bring in a lot of innovation in terms of solutions, in terms of financing, and carbon credits have a role to play. and it would be interesting to explore and learn from others on what could be done about it.
Thanks. Uh, Very rightly said, when we talk about investments in post-harvest management, it has been always a challenge. Unlike the pre-harvest management practices that are already there, and there have been not just flow of funds happening, but even awareness around that topic is much better than what we see in post-harvest management. I would like to maybe open this question for Mr. Pramod, that when we talk about carbon credits in cold chain sector, what are some of the opportunities? Why do we think that, yes, this is the way we can progress?
Thanks, Khushbu, and good morning to everyone. I'll continue from where Dr. Anar left. She mentioned about 1.5 lakh crore food loss that's happening in India, statistics of 2022, of which the fruits and vegetables have a sizable share in that food loss. So the importance of cold chain to reduce the food loss and maybe associated emissions is established. Now the question is, why carbon credits? Now when we talk about carbon credits, and then there is a history to it, we have Ms. Ruchika also in the panel, she can throw more light on this. But the whole idea of carbon credits was, if a sector, if a technology, if a solution is experiencing viability gap, in the business as usual condition, there are barriers in going ahead and establishing that solution, then how carbon credits as an instrument can come in and bridge that viability gap. So the question is, what are the viability gaps today in cold chain sector? If we start with the way cold chain infrastructure have been supported in the last decade, most of the solutions, and keeping aside the large cold storages, if we are talking about the near farm gate solution, for example, most of those projects have been supported by, number one, funds coming in the form of grants. So if there is a philanthropy trying to work for the benefits of farmers, then they have supported it. Or many of these projects have been supported with heavy support of subsidy coming from the central government or from the state government, or a mix of both. Which means, in the absence of subsidy, are there opportunities, are players interested to go ahead and develop this product or not? So that's the first question. That makes a case for additionality and to bring in carbon credits. Second, if we look at how in the subsidy driven or subsidy heavy process, what kind of technological developments are encouraged. So if we look at some of the standards, for examples, or how these systems are developed, because of cost limitation, because of the price benchmarks that were set up maybe 8 years, 10 years before, there is not a very heavy focus on adoption of cleaner technologies. So if we are talking about carbon credits, of course we have to show how these technologies are going to reduce emissions. And the emissions in case of cold chain are coming from broadly 3 sources. Of course, the emission avoidance because of food loss avoidance, but emission also because of the use of energy that is required to power the cold chain. So some of these old benchmarks do not encourage the use of energy efficient technologies or renewable technologies. And that's why there is a scope to have carbon credits in place which can justify the extra effort, which can justify the extra investment that will be required for cold chain. The third part is, if we look at the projects that have been developed so far, and if we purely look at it from the lens of whether those projects are operating properly, and in the absence of subsidy, can they justify the investment or not? Now, most of the micro cold rooms in India, especially which have been supported heavily in the form of grant or subsidy, if we look at their utilization, the utilization is pretty low. And I mean, people here would be aware, for any project to be viable, for example, if you are setting an industry or a factory today, and the industry is not operating at its full capacity, that means there aren't enough revenue to cover the cost of the investment. Same situation happens in case of cold rooms or cold chain projects. It takes a while for the project to start, increasing its utilization and reach a level where the break even can happen. And in the initial years, there is definitely a viability gap, and an instrument like carbon credit can come in to address all of these things which I mentioned.
I completely agree with you, and with our global commitments on climate, on clean energy, and India Cooling Action Plan, some of the other commitments that the country is having, this will be also a path where we are also moving towards sustainable cold chain development. So we talked about why and what. Now, ma'am, Ruchika ma'am, this is a question for how. So your experience from the Bachat Lamp Yojana, where you developed the program of activities, do you see a similar scope in cold chain sector, in this agriculture sector, and what are some of these important points you would like to highlight?
Absolutely. Thank you, Khushbu, and thank you, AEEE, for having me here for this discussion. And I guess, Anar and Pramod have already highlighted the importance of looking at this issue of cold chain in the country like India, where despite having, about 55% of our population involved in the agriculture sector, the contribution to the GDP is only 18%. So this is nowhere close to what it should be. And I think one of the reasons why there is a difference of this, 54% and 18% in the outcome is due to the climatic conditions that we have in India, which are not really favorable for the storage and, post-harvest management of most of the crops in the country. So, with this background, I think the importance of this issue cannot be overstated. And, the cold chains can actually play different roles. I mean, the benefits that it can accrue for the economy are multiple. It can actually, support farmers and prevent the distress selling that farmers do due to the, inability to be able to secure or safely store their produces. It can help in, enhancing the food security of the country, considering we are the, largest country in terms of the population. It can also help in reducing the greenhouse gas emissions that come from the, food production sector. Khushbu mentioned about the international commitments and international discourse with respect to emissions, but India as a country has always kept agriculture out of the emission accounting as far as international reporting is concerned. However, that does not mean that we do not want to, and we are not taking efforts in the agriculture space to reduce emissions. We understand that for India, it is mostly the sector for adaptation and not really mitigation. However, if following those adaptation strategies can have mitigation co-benefits, then that's always a welcome. So having these cold chains, especially the renewable energy based cold chains, can actually help us have direct adaptation as well as mitigation benefits. So it is a definitely win-win situation for in all circumstances. And incidentally, I had the opportunity to look at one of the renewable energy, or rather solar based cold storage facility, small facility at the NICE Center, which is also the office of International Solar Alliance. So that facility is actually not converting solar energy into electricity and then using it for cold storage. It is directly converting the thermal energy from solar to facility of cold storage. So that actually prevents the losses that we have during the conversion from thermal to electrical. We are directly using the thermal energy. So those are the kind of technologies that need to be employed in the sector, not only to mitigate the emissions that happen due to the food wastage, but also from the very energy consumption that happens in the cold storages, which Pramod also highlighted. So I think if we can scale up these technologies of renewable based cold storages and cold chains, that can form a very interesting sector or technology for carbon credits. And all of us know that India has notified its carbon credit trading scheme, and the PAT scheme is now being transitioned to the carbon trading scheme. And this trading scheme basically has two wings. One is the compliance wing, and other is the offset mechanism. Under the offset mechanism, 10 sectors have been identified that have been included in the carbon credit trading scheme. And in the phase 1 itself, it is interesting to note that the agriculture sector is one of the 6 sectors which will be taken up in the phase 1. So with this, I think this is very encouraging and very supportive environment that we have for this kind of technology. In addition to that, the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmer Welfare has come up with a framework for agriculture to be able to participate in the carbon credit mechanism, and they have very they have published a very detailed list of interventions that can take place in the agriculture sector, which can be supported through the carbon markets. And these interventions as of now focus only on the pre-harvest kind of activities that farmers undertake. However, in consultation with Ministry of Agriculture, even these post-harvest technologies can be considered there. And as I said, the framework only gives the indicative list of intervention that can be done. So there is scope to include more into it. So this discussion can be initiated with the Ministry of Agriculture. Additionally, when you talked about how do we do it, I think the first step will be to establish a methodology to be able to quantify the emission reductions that we have from these interventions of having cold chain, because there are multiple benefits to it. However, the carbon credit can only accrue whenever there are quantified GHG emission reductions. So that methodology needs to be developed and proposed to Bureau of Energy Efficiency for publication and acceptance. And once we have that, I think it will be much easier for us to establish a business model to be implementing it at a larger scale. And once we have a business model, I think the opportunity or the possibility of converting into a program of activities for larger deployment can also be explored. So I think we are in the right direction, and the environment, regulation and everything is favorable for these kind of technologies. It is just that we need to be more active in terms of defining how this can actually contribute to emission reduction. So I'll stop here for now, probably come back with more. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks, Ravindra, for joining us in this panel. So we talked about a bit of policy, about what is the need. With you, I would like to know more about how well understood is the concept of carbon credits in this cold chain sector. And when I say cold chain sector, specifically technology providers are concerned, renewable energy-based technology providers. How do the ecosystem players look at carbon credits?
Sure. Thank you so much, and sorry for being late here. See the carbon credit as a concept, because we are into this sector since last 10 years, and thank you so much for quoting solar cold rooms. We are pioneer in solar cold rooms using thermal backup as a technology, and most probably the unit that you must have visited in NICE belongs to Ecozen. So, see the concept is at very nascent stage, at least at this point of time, uh, for DRE and solar-based solutions. Now, one of the important aspect here is the awareness. At manufacturer level, even at the beneficiary level, the awareness is very limited. So we are also trying to like develop some technologies, not here in India, but in Africa, to develop carbon credit for decentralized solar cold rooms. The biggest challenge is the understanding is very limited across the different stakeholders. Now you said very correctly, it uses solar energy as a source of energy, and in the backup there is a water-based thermal backup, which also falls as a part of sustainability. And third angle is because these cold rooms are decentralized, and the major objective is to reduce food loss at the farm gate. So the food loss reduction also contributes towards the carbon credit. But the methodology is not yet developed. I have personally spoken to a lot of stakeholders in the ecosystem. It is very complex methodology. People really don't understand this. But having carbon credit in this sector is very important because of few aspects. One is currently the technology has a big question in terms of affordability as compared to conventional cold storages. Okay, currently it is the cost of solar-based cold rooms using thermal is almost 3x. So it doesn't make sense for a small holder or a marginal farmer to have a financial viability. But if methodology can be developed for this sector, it will definitely help to reduce the initial capex, either by VGF or by any other method. It can also act as a collateral. So the bankability can also be improved. So to answer your question, it is at very early stage. It is not well understood in the sector at this point of time. But we are looking at carbon credit as an opportunity, and it is very encouraging to know from ma'am also that it is already in a consideration for agriculture sector. Even though recently the Ministry of Agriculture has announced 35% subsidy for solar-based cold storages, but it is not sufficient to make the product financially viable. But having provisions like carbon credit will definitely make a lot of sense.
Thanks, Ravindra. So, Anar, I know you've been part of Friends of Champions community. Being here on this panel, if we talk about in this ecosystem of cold chain, horticulture, who are maybe the 5 major players who should definitely be on a table when we talk about carbon credits?
Thank you, and that's a very interesting question to think of 5. See, one, and I completely agree with what has been put up here, that we need to start with quantification and agree on a methodology that yes, this is the method to measure GHG emission from post-harvest. Little is known about that. We know, thanks to MOFP's regular study, we know the quantum of losses, but how do we make sense of the emission factor? One is through the reduced losses, and second through powering storage, transport, and processing. So, and from our Friends of Champions 12.3 India network, which is a collaborative initiative of diverse stakeholders. And when we are talking about food loss and food waste, there are diverse stakeholders involved at every node of the food supply chain who can make this difference. And when we are talking about projects that are viable, bankable, we are talking about, and we are talking about accessibility. So especially smallholder farmers, who are individually not able to afford it. So their collectivization comes in. The role of FPOs or cooperatives or such collectivizing models that could be supported. So I see a role of those collectives here, which could be which would be able to input on the need for such cold chain infrastructure, because as far as what we've understood, every value chain is different. What we would do for tomato may be very different for the poultry. So those requirements will be very specific to that particular value chain. So those insights FPOs and farmer collectives can bring in. Starting from there, innovators, like Ecozen themselves, who could bring in those innovation, in the value chain to sort of fill that gap. And capital. As one of you rightly said, patient capital is very important at this stage, where innovation is not yet at scale. So those are, the third player. And fourth, of course, the government, where we need to validate, the methodology or even like support with patient capital through subsidies and incentives.
So, just a follow-up question to that, and that's for, that's directed to Anar, but I would like to hear opinions of others as well. Who can be the potential owners to the carbon credits that we are talking about?
Or maybe I can. Yeah. So before coming to this question, Khushbu, if I can take a couple of minutes to also reflect on what Ruchika and Anar shared. So on the methodology part, I think it's a great idea that the interested parties should try and see if we will be open to have any conversation to develop a methodology around it. What we found that Vera currently has a methodology in place to establish the carbon emissions occurring from food loss. And we have the UNFCCC methodology in place to establish carbon emissions avoided by the use of energy efficient technologies and renewable technologies. So perhaps for India, number one, there is a need to merge both the methodologies because of the multiple benefits that cold chain can bring, and especially renewable powered cold chain can bring. And then second, of course, those methodologies have to be tailored to the Indian environment, the emission factors that needs to be considered, all of that has to be suited to the Indian conditions. So first point. Second, what Anar mentioned about, if we look at the scope of emission reduction, of course, food loss is one area. Through the use of energy efficiency and renewable technology, the reduction in the indirect emission. I would add another element, which is of clean refrigerants. So right now, the refrigerants that are being used also have a global warming potential or impact on the global warming. And through the use of natural refrigerants, there is a third dimension to further reduce the emission, and the methodology should look at what all can be included, and then it is left to the developers, solution providers, what kind of a solutions they want to bring in, and depending on that, what level of emission reduction can happen. Then, do you want to add here?
I would like to add in here, and especially you asked 5, so who would be the 5th person? And in my opinion, it could be the big businesses, the big food and agri businesses, or FMCG, right? So they have a big role to play here, especially for instance, ketchup companies. Would they have incentive to develop that cold chain and in fact be co-owners of these carbon credits? So those are one of the important stakeholders that can bring in both that investment, innovation, and create a supportive infrastructure.
Yeah, just adding on to your original question of who could be the owners of the credit. Now, if we look at examples from other sectors, and since this is a forum on energy efficiency, perhaps one example I will take is of EESL. So if we look at EESL as an example, for some of the projects, EESL is the owner of carbon credits. What's the main criteria to decide who will be the owner? The straightforward or a simple answer is, whosoever is making that product or solution affordable, or investing in that solution to make it affordable for the end customer, are, I think, logically the owner of the credit. So EESL, because they subsidized LED lamps for villagers, for poor and marginalized people, That's how under the Ujala program, there are two facets to the Ujala program. One example is of the EMI model with many customers in the urban cities. We bought those LED lamps, and through our electricity bills, we paid 10 rupees, 20 rupees EMI per month. But there was another model which was followed in case of rural customers. They didn't have to pay a single rupee for those LED lamps. Those were given for free by ESL in lieu of rights over those carbon credits which those LED bulbs will generate. So that same construct, if we bring it on cold chain, and Anar mentioned about farmer producer cooperatives, farmer producer organizations, if they are the owners and developers of the cold chain projects, they are buying these solutions from companies like Ecogen by paying the full cost, then of course they become the rightful owners of those credits. But if there is a business model where companies like Ecogen are saying, okay, no, we are giving this product to you at 50% discount, hoping that you are number one giving me the rights to those carbon credits, and I will decide how do I want to, so I'm taking that risk. So that will bring in players like Ecogen into picture. And then what Anar mentioned, some of these large, groups which are the ultimate buyers. So if we're talking about the, Reliance Fresh or big baskets of the world, if they are making these solutions ultimately affordable to the end users, to the FPOs, that they can also become the owners of the credit. So it all depends on who is providing the money to make this solution affordable, viable for everyone. That's my 2 cents.
Anybody else would like to add on that?
I think I'm in agreement with this thought. One is because this solar cold room as a technology is at a very early stage in India. So to scale this technology and to make it affordable, government can play a very important role. So I think government can be a very important stakeholder or a owner for this carbon credit. But at the same time, on other side, if we look at the commodity pattern in India, and if I think from farmers' point of view, there are many commodities which are seasonal in nature. And for those commodities, farmer doesn't want to own the cold chain. Okay, so there the business models like leasing as a business model, or even for the smallholder farmer, cold chain as a service model plays a very important role. Now their ownership stays either with the private companies who want to run these models, or with FPOs who want to facilitate this business model to the larger community of farmers. So there I feel the ownership goes towards either the private entities who want to run this model, or FPOs who are already associated with the farmers, but they want to make this model affordable. It makes a lot of sense. So we have experience in last 10 years running both the models, cold chain as a service and leasing as a business model. And we realize that even after providing leasing or cold chain as a service model, it is not yet affordable. You won't believe, like we try to run cold chain as a service model near few mandis, and we were charging 50 paisa per kg to a farmer just to store in a cold storages, but it was still not making sense for them because there was uncertainty in terms of the price fluctuation, there was uncertainty in terms of shelf life of the commodity, and fortunately or unfortunately in India, the farmers are always in a hurry to sell the commodities. So having carbon credit and reducing these prices will make a lot of sense for private entities to run such models and scale, and this will also help to scale the technologies. Okay, thank you.
I think that was my follow-up question as well, that how CAS or the other models could be made more viable, more affordable when we include carbon credits. If we include carbon credits. So I think, yeah, thank you for that answer.
Sure. Thank you.
So moving on to, hello? Hi. So moving on to the next question. Cold chain industry is fragmented, and this is an open question. I would like to hear perspective from everyone, maybe just 2 minutes on this. So cold chain industry is fragmented, making the monetary and validation process of carbon credits a bit challenging. In general, the monitoring framework for carbon credits is a challenging place. What could be some solutions, possible solutions to address this problem?
This is actually a tricky question, and I think I would add one more dimension to monitoring, which is learning. How do we really, innovate on our feet and really respond to the problem at hand in addition to monitoring? So when we are dealing with reducing losses in agricultural value chain, not only is maintaining a GHG inventory, validating that framework important, but it is also important to have more solutions suited to the context, as Ravindra just mentioned. That how do we learn and innovate more? What are the, for instance, if that pricing mechanism is not working, when we are going in with a solution where we are using leasing as a mechanism, then what could be an alternative mechanism to ensure that access? And how does this differ for different value chain? So I think in addition to monitoring, I would also like to add learning and bring in solutions which are more suited to that particular value chain. And when we are developing infrastructure, we have to keep that in mind as well.
Maybe I can go next. So, see, I mean, from my limited experience of working in the past on carbon credit related projects, so there are two sides of it. First, how do you establish the baseline? What is the counterfactual? What if cold chain projects were not in place, would have been the emission? And that's the difficult part to quantify. Reason being, of course, we heard Dr. Anar about the food loss, 1.5 lakh crore. But if you see, and from our day-to-day experience, how much of that fruits and vegetables is actually going into the landfill or into garbage? Maybe there is a market for every quality of produce. The premium qualities are being sold at 200 rupees per kg, slightly inferior quality 100 rupees, and then the next quality is being bought by dhaba walas and all. Sorry, nothing against dhaba walas, but I'm just making a case here that how do we quantify what is the real food loss happening and the emission because of that? Because unless we have a slight better view on that, making a case for the actual emission reductions from cool chain, some people may argue you are overestimating the benefits. So that's where I think we'll have to look at what efforts we put in monitoring. The second part, it's some of these methodologies, if we say, they try to bring a trade-off between what is the sophistication versus simplicity. So while we can install thousands of sensors and we say, okay, we are going to track each and every product and this is how we are going to verify the savings, are we making the process too complicated, too onerous, increasing the cost of monitoring verification in the process? So some trade-off needs to be thought of, both on the establishment of baseline as well as what we are going to establish post implementation of cold chain. So again, I think as a principle, if we try and follow on this path, and I will also share in 30 seconds, at AEEE, we last year deployed 2 micro cold rooms in Bihar. We are doing monitoring of 20 plus micro cold rooms in Meghalaya. The renewable part and energy efficiency part, I'll be honest, it's very straightforward, easy to quantify. But the food loss happening and the avoidance of food loss and the associated emissions because of that, that's the difficult part where I think efforts going forward should be focused on. And again, how do we bring that balance between using technology, complication versus simplification? Thank you.
Thank you, Pramod, for that insight. I'll touch upon some of the things that other panelists have mentioned in last couple of minutes. Number one, on the methodologies. we understand that these renewable energy based cold chains are going to have multiple benefits, and I'm sure there are methodologies across the world, you know, talking about all those benefits in some or the other form. And as Pramod had rightly pointed out, we need to actually bring together all those methodologies and develop one for the cold chains in India. And referring to those established methodologies of voluntary market or UNFCCC can actually, you know, make it easier for the bureau and the government to accept. So that is one thing. Secondly, talking about the baseline, I think we will have to be, you know, little conservative with respect to the baseline, and there has to be a common baseline that can be used by everyone across the country, because, you know, monitoring and quantifying the project-specific baseline can actually be very time and cost intensive. So we need to have a conservative baseline for the country, you know, just like we have the grid emission factor which everyone uses freely. So something of that sort can be developed by the Agriculture Ministry and should be accepted by everyone. So that is probably a way ahead on the quantification of emission reductions from the food losses. And that baseline can actually be, you know, per ton of storage capacity, you know, this much emissions per ton of storage capacity, something of that sort. Now talking about who owns the carbon credit. For this question, I think my simplest answer would be carbon credit goes to wherever the money comes from. And if the money is coming from multiple sources and if it is a blended kind of financing, then it needs to be divided in the ratio of the risk that each of the sources is taking. So that it's very, you know, simple mathematics. So that is about on the different aspects. Talking now about the, you know, monitoring, evaluation, and the framework that we need to have to be able to, you know, scale these kind of efforts. I think India has a very good experience of developing CDM projects in the past. India was one of the largest suppliers of carbon credit, I mean largest in terms of the number of projects registered with UNFCCC. So our you know, ecosystem, our private sector, our verification agencies are very much you know, trained in that aspect, and I'm sure we have had good learnings from the CDM experiences, and we can try to, you know, ease out or probably smoothen some of the bottlenecks that we experienced in the CDM process, so that process can be, you know, simplified to be able to have faster implementability. So these are some of the aspects on the, you know, various aspects of bringing in the cold chain related carbon emission reductions into the market. And as I said, the starting point has to be the Ministry of Agriculture recognizing this as one of the interventions, and Bureau of Energy Efficiency accepting the methodology for it. And here, now that I have the mic, I would want to share that we are also developing the National Adaptation Plan for the country, and agriculture sector is one of the key sectors that we are focusing on. So we would want to, you know, include cold chains as one of the adaptation strategies in the agriculture sector. And I understand AEEE has some experience with respect to cold storages, and Ecozen also has. So we will be happy to receive inputs on these things that can actually be featured into the adaptation plan. And some of the case studies or the success stories can also feature in the plan. And I guess once we have that incorporated in the plan, then probably it will, you know, make it easier for everyone else working on it to be able to convince the government and other entities to focus on it. So thank you very much.
Very well noted, ma'am. We'll reach out to you for providing our inputs as well.
Hello. No, I think very encouraging. I mean, the inputs that we are receiving as a part of this panel. I was also thinking very loudly that from our experiences, we have seen that at farm level, there is absolutely a food loss reduction. I mean, it varies between 20% to 80% in many cases. We have seen like in strawberries, very specifically in Mahabaleshwar, just by deploying the farm gate infrastructure, the food loss has reduced up to 80% in many cases. But the most difficult part is how to monitor this on a regular basis. Because we have done this as a part of our post-harvest management initiative, but as a part of carbon credit, I mean, it's a very complex process for every commodity, how to monitor this, and some baseline has to be developed. Monitoring, I think, renewable energy through solar and having IoT solutions makes sense in many cases. But the decentralized solar cold room is much more than only solar. There are many other components which need to be very thoroughly monitored as a part of this process. So we will definitely think about it, and we will provide some of the inputs which will become part of the national plan, and hopefully it will get adopted throughout the industry. Thank you so much.
I would like to add something here. So, Ruchika mentioned an interesting point about, how do we arrive at that methodology. So, India is one of the few countries that, at the national level, we conduct survey of, important crops and where the post-harvest losses take place once it's at the farm gate up until the storage. And it's done by Ministry of Food Processing in India and NABARD. Now, how do we bring in that additionality to bring in the, bring in the angle of climate here, measure GHG emissions as well. So that additionality has to come in, and if, for instance, MOE, FCC and MOFPI can work together to also, assess what is the unknown part of our, post-harvest loss and what could be the scope for GHG reduction.
Definitely synergies to be developed across the ministries, not just across the ministries, but that's the central and state level as well. Because we have state action plans where we have agriculture as one of the main sector, but we also have then other energy efficiency action plans where we are covering we are talking about strategies to be used. Maybe we are not covering agriculture as a particular segment there. So I definitely agree with you that more synergies need to be developed. I'm also getting a mark that we are almost on the finishing line. So just last one quick question, and it's more like a yes, no, and maybe followed by a 10 words or 20 words response. So do you think carbon credit for cold chain is a good or bad idea?
I don't know why we have not worked on it yet. So yeah, it's immediate.
I think it could be a good idea, but there is a lot to be done, as we just discussed, and multiple stakeholders are required, including the government, the private sector, to come together and make it a success.
I feel carbon credit is a good idea for anything that we really want to implement. So if it can have an angle of carbon credit, it definitely, gives that viability gap funding and additional edge over, other priorities that we have at hand. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. And if we look at agriculture sector today, in some of the research report, it was written that the food loss is almost 90,000 crores in India, right? And if cold chain can solve this problem, and one of the constraint in cold chain is affordability. And if carbon credit can become an enabler to make this cold chain affordable, then I will say it's a brilliant idea. Thanks.
Thank you very much, panel. I would now open the mic for some questions from audience. We have limited time, so I'll just take maybe 2 questions.
थैंक यू माय नेम इज़ कौशिक मैं अभी किसानों के साथ काम कर रहा हूँ पहले GIZ और बैंक में काम किया हूँ with the unanimous yes that carbon credit is a very good idea my submission is to Ravindra ji कि हम फाइनेंशियल इंस्टीट्यूशंस को कैसे लाएंगे और मोनिटाइज कैसे करेंगे इसको इफ़ यू कैन गिव सम फील्ड आइडिया बिकॉज यू आर वर्किंग विद देम because of your business. So now government is here, AEEE is also here as a facilitator. So then they can take it ahead because you need financial institutions to monetize the ultimately the carbon credit.
आपका क्वेश्चन जो मुझे समझ में आया कि फाइनेंशियल इंस्टीट्यूशन को, बैंक्स को, बट थ्रू कार्बन क्रेडिट कैसे लेके आ सकते हैं, राइट?
Ultimately get the money.
राइट. तो इसमें मुझे लगता है दो चीज़ें हैं. आई मीन जस्ट थिंकिंग लाउड. वन इज़ मेथोडोलॉजी का डेवलप होना बहुत ज़रूरी है इसमें, क्योंकि अगर मेथोडोलॉजी डेवलप नहीं होती है तब तक पता नहीं चलेगा कि कार्बन क्रेडिट की वैल्यू क्या है इस टेक्नोलॉजी के लिए. एक बार वो एस्टेब्लिश हो जाता है, देन द बैंक का जो सबसे बड़ा अभी कंस्ट्रेंट है, जो यूज़र है या जो ओनर है, उसकी क्रेडिबिलिटी, वहाँ पे काफ़ी बड़ा डाउट है. आई मीन बहुत सारे स्मॉल होल्डर फार्मर्स, मार्जिनल फार्मर्स, दे वांट टू ओन दिस टेक्नोलॉजी. अनफॉर्चुनेटली either they are defaulters in their lifetime, the credit history is very bad. But अगर कार्बन क्रेडिट एस्टेब्लिश हो जाता है बैंक के लिए, इट कैन बिकम अ कोलैटरल, क्योंकि बैंक को पता है कि इतना तो कार्बन क्रेडिट इससे आने ही वाला है, एंड दैट कैन बी एक्ट एज अ कोलैटरल फॉर देम. दैट इज़ वन. सेकेंड, इट विल ऑल्सो हेल्प बैंक्स टू रिड्यूस देयर इंटरेस्ट रेट, क्योंकि उन्हें पता है कि इतना वैल्यू तो इससे डेवलप होने वाला है. सो इट विल बिकम अ विन विन सिचुएशन. अगर इस टेक्नोलॉजी के लिए कार्बन क्रेडिट आ जाता है, बैंक विल गेट सम बेनिफिट्स देयर, दे विल गेट सम एश्योरिटी. आज क्या होता है ना, कोई भी बैंक जब लोन देने जाती है, दे लुक एट टू थिंग्स. एक है कि उसकी क्रेडिट हिस्ट्री क्या है, सेकंड बिजनेस मॉडल कैसा है. तो उनको चाहिए कि रेवेन्यू बनेगा कि नहीं बनेगा. एंड इन एग्रीकल्चर सेक्टर एवरीथिंग इज अनसर्टन. इस साल रेवेन्यू बन सकता है, देयर इज नो गारंटी कि अगले साल उसी कम्युनिटी पे रेवेन्यू बन सकता है. बट कार्बन क्रेडिट आई थिंक इट इज़ अ कॉन्स्टेंट थिंग. अगर वो मेथोडोलॉजी एस्टेब्लिश हो गई और वो प्रूवन हुआ कि इसमें फाइनेंशियल केस बन सकता है, आई थिंक बैंकिंग सेक्टर के लिए वो काफ़ी बड़ा बूम हो सकता है, इंडस्ट्री के लिए काफ़ी बड़ा बूम हो सकता है, क्योंकि इंडस्ट्री के लिए फाइनेंसिंग की ज़रूरत है, बट वो अभी नहीं मिल रहा है उस तरह से.
थैंक यू. थैंक यू.
Hello, thank you. I have a market side question on this. So we are talking about creating carbon credits and methodologies and all that, but who are the people who will actually, who are the entities who will buy the carbon credits, and what mechanisms do we have to increase the market for them? Because currently people are buying credits because they want to do offsets. And those entities are only sort of the leading edge or the do-gooder people. And that market is going to be limited. So there need to be mechanisms available that we are working on to increase the market so that people value them and want to buy them. So what are the strategies for that?
Should I answer? Yeah. So I think the market for the carbon credit is actually coming from two sides. One which you have already mentioned, the voluntary buyers who want to contribute to the larger good and who have taken self commitments for emission reduction. That is one. The second source of buyers are going to come from the compliance market, and that is what the Bureau of Energy Efficiency and MOEFCC will be notifying the 13 sectors. The designated consumers who were actually part of the PAT scheme are now going to be shifted to the carbon credit trading scheme. And instead of specifying the specific energy consumptions for those sectors, MOEFCC will be notifying the specific emission targets for those consumers. So whoever is able to reduce the emissions below their specific target, they will be actually the generators of the credits, and those who are not able to meet the targets will actually create the demand for carbon credits in the market that may come from the other compliance entities plus also from the offset mechanism. I hope that answered the question. Thank you.
Hello, I have a question. Food being such a fundamental commodity that all of us use, and you mentioned FMCG markets and stuff, don't we as end consumers of food also need to offset? Shouldn't we also need to offset, and can't there be a taxing mechanism if we are buying food which is passing through the cold storage versus buying food which is coming directly from the farmer? Can there be a difference in the taxing mechanism or something like that? Is something like that possible?
Thank you for that interesting question, madam. I mean, in the super ideal world, I think the question is yes, but no. Currently, there is no, plan to tax the consumer with respect to the food, because food is basically the survival need. And I think there are several other things that we would want to tax before we come to the food. So that is probably the straight answer. But then if the consumers really want to contribute to, overall sustainability, emission reductions, then the government is also looking at that also. If you would have heard about Mission Life, which is Lifestyles for Environment, it is basically prescribing certain activities or interventions or the decisions that a common man can take to be able to make their own life sustainable. So I think Mission Life is what is connecting the common man to the global challenge of climate change and emissions. But then the individuals are always welcome to take steps ahead of what has been prescribed or what is being discussed. But yes, the answer to probably your direct question would be no, nothing of that sort is being planned as of now. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think government will like to repeat the joke what happened few weeks back on popcorns. So talking about taxes and food, yeah. But I think as a customer, so there are two aspects to the food, overall food loss. One, of course, that's happening in the chain. Second is the wastage, which happens on customers' plate. So that is the part at least we can take greater responsibility, and how do we try and reduce that wastage. I think that is something which is in our hand rather than asking government to tax people on the way they consume.
I would like to add here that, completely agree that food waste reduction is something in our hands to, directly, reduce emission. We are keeping food away from the landfill. But the sir here, raised an interesting question, and that's something which we should all reflect. While we are thinking about generating carbon credits, who will buy them, right? And that cannot come without cap. The fundamental assumption here for any market to work, especially carbon market to work, is cap and trade. Unless there is no restriction on emission, nobody will be incentivized to buy these credits. So it goes hand in hand. Thank you.
Thank you very much, panelists. It was a really interesting session. This was a very good learning session for me as well. I hope the audience enjoyed this session too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for this enthusiastic participation and making this session a great one. I now kindly invite Bhaskar Natarajan sir, AEEE, to please present a token of appreciation to the esteemed panelist. And also a group photograph of all the panelists. Can you come in front for the group photograph?